Hi, my name is Alan T. Black, and this is my very first time doing something on YouTube. As y'all can see from the gray hair, I'm quite the senior citizen now. And so for me to do something like this is really and truly quite a leap of faith. To that end, in terms of what I wanted to name the very first YouTube video that I'm doing, I did want to call it Alan T. Black Stepping Out on Faith. I think that's important because at this point in my life, there have been a lot of things that I have kind of held back on, not necessarily knowing for sure if I had what it took in order to get something done. So to that end, just to kind of share a little bit of information about you, my background in terms of prior to my becoming a writer was I worked in higher education for about 14 years now that I think about it. And I worked in teacher education. And during that time, I had a lot of opportunities to work with young students as they prepared to go into the teaching profession, teaching K-12. And in some cases, some students actually wound up teaching at post-secondary levels as well. So that was a great career, which I really enjoyed tremendously. I retired back early summer, I would say 2011, and transitioned into a new period in my life. About 3 years ago, because I'm semi-retired, I'm not that person who's going to just basically just retire and stop working, because if you've been working since you're 7 years old, it's just kind of hard to stop. So I have a little part-time job that I've been doing probably for about 6-7 years or so, just to kind of keep my mind alert, keep active, and try to be as sharp as I possibly can. Saying all that to say this, the job that I currently have, I work like 6 in the morning to about 12 noon, 3 or 4 days a week. So how I began my writing career is really, to me, it's a very interesting story, because my writing side of Alan T. Black really has been rooted in music. I'm a lyricist, so what that means is I write the lyrics for a lot of different songs. I've done it locally, and a lot of the songs that I have been a co-writer on have gotten airplay locally across the country and across the world as well. So there's always been a writing component to my life in terms of the music. But in 2015, what began to happen was there was a transitioning away from the music, at least temporarily, in terms of just being a pure writer, as I would call it. Now, whether or not that's the technical term, I really don't know, but that's what I'm just going to call it for the purposes of this YouTube video. So back in 2015, at my part-time job, since I'm there so early in the morning, like at 6 o'clock, there's really not a lot to do. So I wasn't that person. I've never been that person who would, like, say, whip out your cell phone and do stuff like play games on the phone, things like that. That's just not my thing. Doesn't interest me. Never has, probably never will. I'm not that person as well who goes online to do a lot of shopping. My definition of shopping is you go in, you get it, you come out, and you're done. 5-10 minutes and you're done. So to shop online, that's not my thing either. So what began to happen in the early stages of 2015, I actually began the process of just kind of what I call vamping. Vamping, to me, in terms of how I interpret it, is I just really began just to write down different thoughts, different concepts, different opinions, and things like that. And so what began to happen in 2015, I began to really find myself just kind of writing, just kind of vamping or freestyling, and it began to crystallize into essentially some Christian essays. And when I wrote my first 2 or 3, it was kind of scary because I had never written in that particular vein before. I remember finishing up the 3rd one, and I was kind of sitting there. I was kind of scratching my head and trying to figure out what exactly was going on, because I had never written in that vein before, as I mentioned previously. So I wound up talking to a good friend of mine who's a minister, and I was explaining to him what was going on and my concern about it, just because this was something totally new that I was experiencing. And so he told me that a lot of times what we find in our lives is that if we are just willing to be obedient to what God's calling us to do, he would take you in a direction that perhaps you really weren't thinking about, and perhaps you weren't even thinking in terms of doing or going. And so that's what began to happen with me in terms of my writing. I wound up actually getting about 14 or 15 what I call Christian devotions or essays done. And so I didn't really know what to do with them. And so I shared a few with a coworker, and a coworker was really excited. She says, well, why don't you write for a blog? Well, I've always been that person who would tell somebody, you need to be writing for a blog, or you need to be writing for a blog. That was never my thing. It was never my intent or my dream. So I responded to her by saying, well, I'm not that kind of writer. I don't think I could do it. I'll never forget her response, because she just looked at me. She said, well, why not? Have you tried? I couldn't think of a response to come back. And so I said, well, she's got a point. I do have to at least try. So I wound up submitting a few of my Christian essays to some websites around the world. All of them came back negative, which is what I was kind of expecting. And then this very last one that I reached out to, turns out they were in Singapore. The website is called Christian Blessings. And so I sent them one of my essays, which I said this was going to be the last one I was going to send out. Lo and behold, they said, hey, we like this. We want you to wind up being a writer for us on a weekly basis. I said, wait a minute. This is way over my head. How about once a month? So they said, okay, why don't you start writing for us once a month, beginning January 2016. So I started writing, and I just continued to write. And so when I got to the point where I had about 30 or 35 of these short essays done, this same coworker said, well, okay, you've been writing for this Christian blog for almost a year. This was toward the end of 2016. So how come you don't put them in a book and publish them? I had no answer again. I couldn't think of a rebuttal and tell her, no, I can't. So I said, okay, so let's just see what can happen. So I wound up continuing down that road and actually was able to put these together. And I was able to release my first book in the spring of 2017. And that's this book here called Here I Am, Lord. It's a short book. It's about 100 pages, 115 pages, somewhere in there, of like 35 short Christian essays. Each of them is kind of just written from my perspective in terms of different topics that the Lord would kind of put on my heart, and I would just kind of write as He led me to. Like one's entitled A Daily Blessing. Another one's entitled, say, a different drum beat. And a few more are like, say, Picture of BMW. The Picture of BMW I thought was very special to me, and is special to me because when you think of BMW, you're thinking about the automobile, which we all do. They're fantastic, they're just beautiful. But when I began to write, the Lord gave me a different vision, interpretation of BMW. And it comes from Psalms. And essentially the BMW that He gave me to write about, B stands for beautiful, M made, W wonderfully. So I wrote about how each of us is a BMW, beautiful and made wonderfully, because we are made by God, who makes all of us unique, and all of us are different. There are no two people who are alike. Each of us have our own identity, we have our own purpose, and we have our own destiny that we're going to fulfill. So I went ahead, and lo and behold, I wound up actually doing, like I said, the first book, which has been a real blessing to me. It's been a blessing because what I've learned through this process is that a lot of times what we need to do is just to take those first steps along the road. You're stepping out on faith, and it's important to realize that you may not know where you're going, but God's already has a determination in terms of where you're going to go and how you're going to get there, because you are essentially just following in the footsteps that He's going to establish before you. So saying all that to say this, as we wrap up this first video, it's important that each of you takes time to find out from the Lord what it is that He has for you to do. And I'm a firm believer that if He has something for you to do, He's going to always equip you with what you need to get it done. Because what it is He's calling you to do is strictly for you and for you alone. It's not for anybody else, it's strictly for you. So again, as I share this video, I do so as a way of means of saying that I'm just basically a very ordinary guy. As you can see, like I said, an old man whose hair is getting real gray real quick, who found himself stepping out on faith and accepting the calling to become a writer. It's been an amazing journey. It's still a journey that I'm going through. And truthfully, it's still a journey that I have a hard time believing that I'm undertaking. But in spite of the human doubt, what I try to lean on is not my own understanding, but to trust and believe in God, to know that what He has for me is for a special reason, is to give Him the glory. And all He's asking me to do is, like the title of my book says, "Here I am, Lord, call me. I'm ready to move forward and do what it is that you're calling me to do." And to do so because I'm willing to step out on faith. Again, my name is Alan T. Black. I'm excited to share this, my first YouTube video. Can't believe I'm saying that. I'm still shocked. But this is just the beginning again of a new transformation that the Lord is bringing me through at this time and in this particular season in my life. So again, looking forward to presenting more YouTube videos from a very ordinary person, being called to do something special because that's what God has in store for me. Thanks. See you at the next video.